All right, this week we are in Ezekiel chapter 47. The prophet has, in a vision, been taken to for the last part of his last prophecy, has been taken to the heavenly temple, the temple which is the framework, the pattern that is being seen and being shown to him as what the final temple standing on earth ever, which is not standing yet, but will be, I believe, within my lifetime, standing on earth in Eretz Israel. He's being shown the dimensions. And a man is walking through showing it to him and explaining to him the measurements of everything in the temple and what those things are for and how they are supposed to be made and how they are supposed to be used. And throughout the entire process, he is being shown what the Levites will be doing, which is interesting when you take into the fact that today we're told, well, we're part of the order of Melchizedek. We don't need to worry ourselves about the things of the order of Aaron or Aaron or the order of Levi. We don't need to know about the suborders and when they go into the temple, and we don't need to know about the sacrifices. And I've explained over and over again that if you read it in context and you read it without taking anything away and piecing it out for your own purposes, if you read the context, it's very clear that this third temple is also what some people call the fourth temple. This temple that we built will be built on the Temple Mount in Eretz Israel, I believe within my lifetime. My grandfather also believed it would be in his lifetime, so I could be as wrong as he was, but I believe all the things are coming to pass that have to come to pass for it to happen. That when we go into the 1,000-year reign, and then beyond that, that this temple will continue to stand, and that it will be the place of earthly worship throughout the week, and on the Shabbat, and on the new moon, we will go up into the heavenlies by means of entering into the New Jerusalem that will come down out of heaven. But as we come close to the close of this prophecy, it says, "He led me back to the entrance of the temple, and I found that water was issuing from below the platform of the temple eastward, so the temple faced east. But the water was running out at the south of the altar under the south wall of the temple." Water is issuing from the altar in the temple. You know those places in the Brit Hadach where they say, "Oh, this is the new covenant thing. This is the replacement for that old covenant stuff. This is the issuing of living water. This is where everyone will come forth and get living water, and they'll never thirst again." And they say, "Look, that's what Mashiach." They say they don't use the term Mashiach, but this is what he promised to us. No. This is what has been promised to his people from the beginning. The Brit Hadach is not a new covenant; it is the covenant that has always been there, made new, renewed, refreshed. People read about this same thing in Revelation and think that it's a new thing because they've never read Ezekiel. "Then he led me out by way of the northern gate and led me around to the outside of the outer gate that faces in the direction of the east. And I found that water was gushing from under the south wall. As the man went on eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits and led me across the water. The water was ankle deep. So he led him out 2,500 feet. Then he measured off another 1,000, or 2,500 feet, and led me across the water. The water was knee deep. He measured off a further 1,000 and led me across the water. The water was up to the waist. When he measured yet another 1,000, it was a stream I could not cross, for the water had swollen into a stream that could not be crossed except by swimming. You know what I believe this is? You know, in the book of Revelation, where it talks about this same thing, it says that there was many waters, and the many waters represent the many nations and the many tribes and the many tongues. I believe this is the proclamation of the law and the gospel, the law being the gospel, the law being grace also. I believe that this is how it is supposed to have happened and how it's going to happen in eternity. The 9 Levi, the sons of Levi, teach the rest of Yisrael. The Yisraelim go out and teach who? The Noahide. Okay? The righteous Gentiles, or the Goyim who want to live like Jews but haven't crossed over. Okay? And then we all go out and we teach the next group and the next group until we get farther and farther from those of us who are actually in the covenant, until we reach more and more people. And I believe that's why, as it issues out, just like in the so-called Great Commission, where he says what? He says, begin in Jerusalem. He says, in Judah, and Syria, or Samaria, Syria, and all the world. Okay? He says, start where you are and work out. And I believe that's exactly what this is a picture of. Beginning at the temple, on the Temple Mount, with the ministry of B'nai Levi, and working out until the power of the truth is so great that it becomes an overflowing flood. Until the entire world is overcome with truth. Do you see, O mortal? He said to me, and he led me back to the bank of the stream. As I came back, I saw trees in great profusion on both banks of the stream. Sound familiar? If you've ever read Revelation, this is a familiar picture. Again, oh, look at the book of Revelation. It's such a pretty picture. It's such a beautiful thing. Look what our Messiah, whatever we want to call him. Okay, look what he's promised us. No. All he was doing was reminding us of what the prophet had already told us in Tanakh. The water, he told me, runs out to the eastern region and flows into Araba. Anybody think you know what Araba might be? Arabia. Oh, Beit Araba, the house of Arabia. B'nai Araba, the sons of Arabia. Our cousins. Remember, we talked about that earlier on. We talked about that in the Genesis teaching. We talked about that in this teaching. We talked about it over and over again. We see that they may not be our brothers, but they're our distant cousins. Okay, they're as much our distant cousins as us being Ashkenazi. I talk to Sephardic Jews, and I say, really, we're just cousins. We're just far enough separated that we don't necessarily look the same, but we come from the same place. Okay, those Arabs that we are told, so many secular Jews tell us to hate the Arabs, and the Arabs are told to hate the Jews, and guess what? Guess what? We're not supposed to hate anybody, especially not our cousins. We're supposed to love them. They're supposed to be some of the first people we try to reach as we're creating this flood. And when it comes into the sea of foul waters, literally that's the Dead Sea, the water will become wholesome. Part of why I think this is happening today and the temple will be built in my time? The Dead Sea is coming to life, people. The water is becoming less and less salty. Fish that couldn't live in it before you. At one point, nothing could live in it. And then some saltwater fish could get in there and live, but not most. And then pretty much all saltwater fish. And now there are portions of it that are fresh water. There are sections where freshwater fish are actually able to live at certain depths, but not others. Plants that could never live in it before are living in it now. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the word of Elohim does not return void. Every living creature that swarms will be able to live wherever this stream goes. The fish will be very abundant once these waters have reached there. That's happening, folks. Thousands of years ago, people laughed, I'm sure, when this was prophesied. People scoffed at the prophet. For generations, in my grandfather's day, when he was my age, he believed it would happen, but he didn't know how it could happen. It was considered scientifically impossible for this to just happen through natural causes. Fishermen shall stand beside it all the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. It shall be a place for drying nets, and the fish will be of various kinds and most plentiful, like the fish of the great sea. You understand what that is? The great sea? The sea at the middle of the earth. That's what the name Mediterranean means, Middle Earth. But its swamps and marshes shall not become wholesome. They will serve to supply salt. See, there will still be a need for the salt of the Dead Sea. But we can have the salt of the Dead Sea for the things that it's needed for purification, and yet we can have life in the so-called Dead Sea. That what was barren will be fruitful. This is a picture of the fruit of Yisraelim. If we do what we are to do, if B'nai Levi teach B'nai Yisrael, and B'nai Yisrael teach B'nai Noach, and so forth, if B'nai Araba should have been in there in the middle there, but if we do this as it is said that we're to do it, these things will happen. And this is happening. It will happen more abundantly the more confidently and the more faithfully we go forth and do what we're told to do. All kinds of trees for food will grow up on both banks of the stream. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail. They will yield new fruit every month, because the water for them flows from the temple. Constant renewal. Kind of like the covenant. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves, I love this, their leaves for healing. Our daughter Hadassah. Hadassah is taken from the book of, we'll call the book of Esther, because Hadassah was her Hebrew name. Has a very symbolic meaning to how she came into the world and how she came to be our daughter through adoption. But the name actually means myrtle tree. And the beautiful thing about a myrtle tree is that the leaves grow throughout the year. At one part of the year they're bitter, at one part of the year they're sweet. But when they're bitter, they can be used for healing of certain illnesses. And when they're sweet, they can be used for healing of other illnesses. Okay, there's a picture there that no matter what is wrong with you, no matter what is wrong with me, no matter how we are broken, no matter how we are hurting, Elohim of heaven gives us healing if we will let him. If we will be faithful to his calling, if we will teach his word to the Goyim as we're commanded to do, he will give us healing to the woes of our hearts, to the brokenness of our flesh. Thus said Yehovah Elohim, these shall be the boundaries of the land that you shall allot to the 12 tribes of Yisrael. Pay attention. Pay attention. This is important. Yosef shall receive 2 portions. We're going to get to why he gets 2 portions as we get to the end of Genesis and to the blessing upon the 12 sons. Yosef himself did not get a blessing, but his 2 sons each got a blessing, and so it became sub-tribes of Yosef. And you shall share the rest equally. You get that? So instead of dividing the land 12 ways, divide the land 13 ways. Yosef gets 2 portions. Everybody else gets 1 portion per tribe. Okay? In the order of inheritance, Yosef subjugated everyone else, and he received the birthright. As the northern limit from the Great Sea by way of Hethlon, Lebo Hamath, Zedad, Beerotha, Sibrim, which lies between the border of Damascus and the border of Hamath, down to Hazar Hattikon, which is on the border of Haran. Thus the boundary shall run from the sea to Hazar Enon, to the north of the territory of Damascus. Wait a minute. You mean the territory of Damascus belongs to us? With the territory of Hamath to the north of it, holy cow. That shall be the northern limit. As the eastern limit, a line between Haran and Damascus, and between Gilead and the land of Israel, and the Jordan as a boundary, you shall measure down to the eastern sea. That shall be the eastern limit. The southern limit shall run a line from Tamar to the waters of Meribath Kadesh, along the Wadi of Egypt and the Great Sea. That is the southern limit, all the way down into Egypt, into Mitzrayim, where we were slaves. The Wadi of Mitzrayim. You know what a wadi is? It's the dry part of a riverbed. All of Mitzrayim is one big riverbed for the Nile. So all of that land in which we were sojourners is to be ours according to birthright. And as the western limit, the Great Sea shall be the boundary up to the point opposite Lebo Hamath. That shall be the western limit. The land you shall divide for yourselves among the tribes of Israel. You shall allot it as a heritage for yourself and for the strangers who reside among you, who have begotten children among you. You shall treat them as Yisraelim. They shall receive allotments along with you among the tribes of Israel. You shall give the stranger an allotment within the tribe where he resides, declares Yehovah Elohim. I want you to think about this. I just saw this today on the internet, this argument going on. Why is it that B'nai Araba, which I just said there are distant cousins and we should love them, not hate them, but why is it that they are convinced when they own 95% of this and we own 5%? Why is it that they believe we are the occupying enemy? I'll tell you why. Because they have believed a lie called Islam. Because they have believed a lie which has said that the favored son was Ishmael, not Yitzhak. But do you know what else this says? Something that their Quran does not tell them. This says that the land, that all of that land belongs to Bnei Israel and To the stranger who would choose to dwell among us and have children among us and live as though they were us. There are some huge differences between Islam and the faith of Torah. Huge differences. But there are few differences. Quran recognizes Moshe as an absolute authority. Quran recognizes Yeshua HaMashiach. They say he's a prophet, not Mashiach. They say he's Ketuim, not Mashiach. But they also understand that Mashiach simply means anointed, and they believe that he is anointed Ketuvim. Yes, there are differences to be overcome, and they are big differences, but they are few differences. And perhaps the answer, before we go and fight another war to get back that 95%, perhaps we should be trying to convince them to look at the similarities rather than the differences, and use that as a talking point, and then say to them, all of this land is ours by birthright, but you are the stranger, our distant cousin, who chooses to live among us, and we give you allotment. That place where you're living, you go right ahead and you live there, and be blessed for living among Beit Israel in the Eretz that he gave us. Live with us in peace. That should be our message. Will they receive it? No, prophecy says they won't receive it until the last day. But how can they receive it at all if we're not preaching? If we're letting ourselves get caught up in all this political rigmarole, if we're letting ourselves be convinced that they're the enemy and not our cousins. You know, I have niece and nephew, actually 2 nieces and a nephew who came to the area this week. One of them lives in Mount Vernon, Indiana. We don't see her maybe once a year, if that. The others live in North Carolina, in Raleigh, however you pronounce that, and come in about twice a year. We don't see them. But do you think when my children see them that they hate them like the enemy? Or do they embrace them like family? Okay, now, my children and those children are being raised differently. I don't approve of the way my nieces and my nephew are being raised, and some of the reasons have been spelled out in this past week, and we've seen some behavioral issues that Lisa and I would never approve of with our children that a blind eye got turned to. Really, I think that's how we are with B'nai Arabah. Do we believe that our Father approves, our Creator approves of the behavior of much of B'nai Arabah? No. How about much of B'nai Noach? No. It doesn't change the fact that they're our cousins. It doesn't change the fact that if you go back a few generations, and I mean few relatively in the eyes of Elohim, if you go back a few generations, there were 2 brothers. And one was beloved by his father and got cast out wrongly. And that was their ancestor. And there's been a family feud going on ever since. Do we need more than 5% of the land to sustain ourselves long term? Yes. If every member of Beit Yitzhak is going to move home, yes, we're going to need more than 5%. But estimates are we would need about 15% for every ethnic Jew who wants to go home to go home. What are we going to do with the other 85%? I think it's where we should let our cousins live. And we should do it in peace. Do we have a midrash? Yes.
So you think, so you're saying that you think that the stranger is the cousins or anything?
Oh, I think that's part of it. See, I was going to say something today and I forgot about it. Before I bring it up, I'll say it now. I meant to say it in my message. My father-in-law said something one time. And before I say this, let me quantify. I love my father-in-law. I have with my father-in-law the relationship I wish I had with my father. Okay? My father-in-law is a God-fearing man who, unfortunately, doesn't see certain truths that I wish he saw, but that doesn't make him a bad man. Okay? He's in a mainline church, but what he knows of Scripture, he believes wholeheartedly and he strives to follow it. He's a good man, far more righteous than most men I know. He told me something one time when I was still young enough in my faith walk that I didn't know that what he told me wasn't right. And he said, the difference between Israel and the church, the biggest difference is that God never promised land to the church. I believe this passage of Scripture says that he's wrong. Because so many in the mainline church who don't understand the beauty of living as Israel. Maybe they're ethnic Jews and they don't know it. They feel they're called, but they haven't made that full Hebrew. They haven't come all the way over. Okay? Maybe they're absolute goyim, but they see the beauty of what Elohim promised, and they're clinging to him the only way that they understand. And they're living by those 7 laws of the Noachim. And they're living as Cornelius, as a righteous goyim, or goy, a righteous goy. And they're doing all that they know is right. There has to be a place for them. There has to be a place in covenant for them, or we wouldn't see people in Scripture progress through stages in the covenant. And I believe that part of that is with being the stranger, the ger, or the ger toshav, who dwells among Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, in this region of the earth that is given over for the promise. I believe that part of the reason that landmass that is promised to us is so big is that there's probably going to be more ger and ger toshav in that land in eternity than there are going to be Yisraelim. If we are doing what we're commanded to do, then that's going to be a fact. And there are people out there who either are not Yisraelim or don't know that they are Yisraelim, who are living as Benai Noach, and who are doing so faithfully and calling themselves Baptists and Methodists and Lutherans and they've got all these other names that they put on themselves because they don't understand what Scripture says. There has to be a place for them because it says here that if they are strangers who dwell among us, who cling to some portion of what we know, who haven't made that full crossing over, if they live among us, we have to give them a portion of the land too. It wouldn't say that if it wasn't intended to be that way. So as much as I love my father-in-law, I believe he's wrong in his statement that the church is not promised land. I believe if you're part of that, and that's all you know, and don't know how to cross over, or you haven't come to that point in your faith walk yet, I think that's okay. I think you're making the journey. And if you die in this life before you fully cross over, I don't think that cuts you out of the land. You may not live in like immediately around the New Jerusalem, but you know what? I think you're going to live in that land. You're going to have an allotment, just like you were Ezra. Yes.
I actually think that I wonder. I agree with you, but I also wonder if maybe even I think you can say step further that the sons of Ishmael may actually be Ezra, and the stranger would be basically the mean the little mummies. Eventually,
But
not all of them.
But in order to be Ezra, you have to either be descended from Yaakov, or you have to be circumcised and keep Pesach. They don't keep Pesach. A lot of them are circumcised because Islam teaches that, but they're not keeping Pesach. Well, if they keep Pesach, then they've taken the last step of crossing over, and they're not considered Muslim anymore. They're considered Jewish.
And then, also, I think it really is true that the Dead Sea is kind of a lot. I've seen a video of it and portions of it, fish that are in it now, and different plants continue growing parts of it. That's amazing.
And people say, "Look, Mother Nature is reclaiming her earth." No, the Elohim of Abraham is keeping his promise.
Right.
And it actually makes me mad when I hear people say, "Oh, look, it's just nature doing its thing." No, it's our Creator doing His thing.
I think one of the things you said is if we are out, preaching the truth, telling people the truth and love. I think I don't even say if. I say it's a matter of when, and it's a matter of are we going to be out there telling people the truth? Because if we don't, someone else will, and it's going to all happen eventually anyway. So we might as well be out there telling the truth.
That's right. Amen. Anybody else?